Good morning, everyone. My name's Hank Setala,
And I'm Dr. K.
and I totally made us on the other
I
sides that
was
I'm
about
used
to
to.
say we switched.
Oh, no, that's so. Anyway, we'll just roll with the punches. But this is something that we do every Friday. We call it the Holistic Health Highlights. And today's topic is all about empath overload, which, of course, with the state of the world and pandemic and elections and everything, people who are empaths anyway are even more on overload. And so we just wanted to talk today about that and hopefully offer some tips, tools, techniques that can help people to start, mitigating all that overwhelmingness.
And if you don't know what an empath is, and you're completely new here, let's just call it emotional overload because that's what empaths kind of rotate around. So,
Yep. That's the most common thing. Like empaths are, well, let me first say that everybody is empathic. Even the worst of the worst narcissists, there's a little speck of empathic ability in there somewhere. Empathy is like awareness. And I think my friend Ryan, he has a great definition or a way to kind of spell it out is that like the body is like this wide range receiver. And maybe most people pick up AM, FM radio, just like your car stereo, and they get, the most important signals or the most, abundant signals. But then you have other people who pick up broadband and infrared and all these other frequencies. And so empaths are really like this multi-sensory. They're aware of so much more than somebody that's an average empath. And that's kind of where we're talking to those people that are on the further end of the bell curve that really pick up other people, places, things, entities, all kinds of stuff like that. And we got Mark back. Good morning, Mark. It's
good
been a
morning.
couple streams since we've seen you on.
He's
I'm so
been
glad that
busy.
he's been busy. Well, great. Well, I'm so happy to have you on. He's our resident comedian. We're guaranteed to get a couple good jokes from him today.
Yeah, and empaths, I think the thing that just came to mind is if we have any males here, it's the women that are empathic. They're the ones that feel the whole gut thing, right? But you guys have it too. I think you block it out a little bit
Yeah,
because
I
you
think
guys
men,
have
because
it.
we got to be tough guy. Men
Yeah.
are more prone to pretending that they don't know that they know, but they are just as
Yep.
much a train wreck inside as other people.
Yep. So hopefully we have some guys on here that are gonna have a little light bulb go off and use this to your advantage. We all have the gift. Don't block it out. Use it to your advantage, and you can use this to your advantage in your business. So that may be another part series. Empathy is not like sappy. I'm gonna cry. It's the women, that are like, and so empathic and mushy. It's not always that. It's when you, I think, embellish and let yourself dive into it, um, that it can become out of control. But it is an awareness. It is a heightened awareness of what's going on, and you kind of look around and go, okay, what do I got to do? But when all these things come at you and you don't know what it is and you don't know why you're feeling all these feelings, and then you go to your doctor and it's like, well, you're depressed, you're anxious, and here's a pill, and then we shove that stuff down because we don't know how to manage it, because you don't know you have the gift. That's when it becomes interesting. So I think that's my touch on the medical side is I'm pretty darn empathic, and a lot of women are, and a lot of women don't even know about this and this topic, and they feel the emotional overload, especially now. And you don't realize it's not always all your stuff. And so you go to the doctor because you can't handle it, because you're nervous, because you're anxious, because you're too angry, because et cetera, et cetera. Or you self medicate, or you drink some more stimulants, whatever it is, when yes, it may be a little bit of a physical issue, but it also may be this empathic issue.
I just remembered I have to make my Facebook thing public. But there's three main things that I want to speak to with empaths. Is number one, to your point, like a lot of the things aren't even yours, and a tool from Access is who does this belong to? And if you feel overwhelmed, the first question asked, is it even mine? And 99% of the time, it's not. As an empath, as a human being, we have awarenesses of other people, places, and things. And a lot of times we're misidentifying somebody else's stuff as our own stuff. And then that brings me to the second thing that I was going to bring up. If you name it, you claim it. So if you are looking at it as yours and you're claiming it, that's where it kind of takes a hold in cellular memory. And more specifically than that, when you have a judgment about what you're aware of. That's really what the term "you name it, you claim it." That's something else I got from Ryan, is that if you have a judgment about whatever it is you're aware of, that's when you're taking it on, because you're locking it into the duality. If you're saying, "Oh, that's terrible," "Oh, that's wonderful," either one of those is locking it in. And Dr. K already alluded to it. She said, "Oh, that's interesting. This is the tool to get around that interesting point of view." If you are just aware of it and you go, "That's interesting," as opposed to go, "Ooh," or whatever the case is, you're not going to be locking it in, and you can just have the awareness and start to choose differently instead of being in a reactionary mode because of the barrage of other people's crap that we get flung at us.
Yeah, so that's really the key. And I don't know if I should just give it away now
Oh,
or
give it away. Give it all away, Dr. K.
okay. So transmuting the energies, the things, energies by what we mean by energies is the things you're feeling. Transmuting the energies or emotions or whatever these emotions, you can fill in that blank, instead of absorbing them, is a skill every empath should master. The key to transmutation is being a neutral observer and remaining detached. Don't identify yourself with other people's emotional baggage. That is the key. Write that down, re-listen to it. But from here, you're going to be like, how do I do that?
Right. And a great tool for that is to not look at things as, people will judge themselves if they find that they don't care about something. Well, I don't care about that. Like, it's not that you're trying to be a jerk or anything like that, or non-compassionate to people, but ask the question, is it really relevant to what you're choosing and what you're choosing to be and all that? It's a much kinder way to say it, because it's not that you don't care about people, but what if you really only took on and gave attention to what's relevant for what is going on in your world and what's going to create possibilities for you? All that 99% of all that other stuff melts away. Other than, why are you noticing it in the first place? I don't normally ask the question why, but really look at, I'm noticing this for some reason. This is coming on my radar for some reason, because oftentimes that 99% of other people's stuff is resonating with the 1% that's actually yours. And asking the question, if you feel really overwhelmed by somebody else's feeling, ask yourself, when have I felt like this before? And what that's going to do is that one little percent that's actually your own stuff that you need to work through starts to resonate. And you might just find an easier time noticing it. And then you can start doing your own work. But sometimes it's like you have to get a backhoe out to get rid of all the crap that's not yours to even get at the little 1% that actually is your stuff to deal with.
That's the thing that takes work. It takes time. All these things pile up like a pile of laundry, folded laundry, or basket case of laundry, and you got to get to the bottom to find that sock you're looking for, right? And so you have to take everything out, and this is the work Hank and I do, because once you pop that thing at the bottom and you find that sock, or a ring or whatever it is at the bottom of your basket, things get so much easier.
Right,
So
because now you're not going to bring that stuff in anymore. That resonates with that sock. You're not going to bring that 99% of crap in anymore. That dirty laundry from other people, to use your analogy.
It's other people's emotional baggage. So a lot of times I hear from people, I don't even know why I'm feeling this way. This doesn't make any sense. I've had this happen to me, especially now. I'm like, why am I so angry? I have no reason to be angry. And then it's like, okay, if you have no reason to be angry, and you haven't eaten anything, and you haven't taken anything, and you haven't done anything to provoke that anger, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, or you're like, I don't really even know why I'm feeling this way. That is a key question, because I think that alludes to, this may not be yours. You may be feeling it from somebody else. And it's interesting when you go to somebody's home. Have you ever been to somebody's home? You and your husband go, you and your sister go, and you come home, and you're at this person's home, and you're like, I'm feeling kind of edgy, and I'm feeling kind of maybe aggravated, and then you come home and you get in a fight, and you're like, that made no sense. There's a whole big end of this when you go to somebody's place, maybe a restaurant, anywhere, that you're probably picking up on somebody else's stuff, and you dragged it home with you. And the interesting, I'm going to toss a little edge here, but the interesting thing about crystals, which are in walls, I think after 1950, if I'm not mistaken, they started putting quartz and things, like when they build the drywall, there's all kind of crystal things in there. And crystals pick up energy, and sometimes that's projected back. And you've got the people running around. So if you go to a house where somebody's arguing a lot, say you go to a party, and the husband and wife argue a lot. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't know that. And you come home, and you're like really agitated. you were in an environment where that kind of energy is running around, and you picked that up and you kind of brought it home, but it's not yours. So this runs in a lot of different directions with what's going on right now.
And Ernie offers a comment that is kind of what we were talking about with interesting point of view. It's the unconditional
Yep.
witnessing and participation, or really look at it like a play. Like you don't have to, really embellish the part and actually take on the emotions of the character. You're just the indifferent actor, if you want to call it that way. I don't know if I really like that analogy that I said out loud, but you get the idea that you don't have to get caught up in the drama. That's
I
the essence of what I was going for.
watch it like a movie, and
Watch it like a movie.
this takes a little bit of muscle. Start doing it. I try to analyze it this way. You just pull yourself back, pretend you're watching a screen, pretend you're watching yourself, you're watching all these people, and you go, how interesting that this person is reacting this way. And when you start doing that, just pulling yourself back and watching and being the observer, you automatically untangle yourself from these emotions. Now, sometimes it's maybe a little easier said than done.
Right.
It's tricky, but
And you could be very centered in one place of your life and then get taken totally off in another place. So it's like something you really got to be aware at all times, because just because you have mastery of it in one little area of your life, you could get blindsided somewhere else and go into reaction mode instead of response mode, and you're starting all over again.
yeah, there's certain things that trigger certain people. And it's a tricky question. I'm just speaking from my part when you say, does this belong to me? Because I've asked myself that question. I'm like, I don't know. I think so. So I don't know if there's a better way to pick that apart, Hank.
Well, one thing you could ask truth, does this belong to me? And if you get the I don't know, like it still takes a little practice, but you can even get the energy if you're saying you don't know. Is it just something that you're actually aware of that you're not willing to acknowledge? Because maybe you want it to be yours, but it takes a lot of practice. And if you're not sure, then I would say then use another tool to start working with that energy and transmuting that energy. Well, what could I be here to create a different possibility? Because I'm all about the question. Or using one of Dr. K's processes of all the times, it was the
All the times
Prometheus,
and all the ways. Yeah, it's
all
called
the times
Prometheus.
and all the ways that I've been
Blah,
feeling
blah.
resentment or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And you start to dive down, because whether it's yours or not in a way is irrelevant. It's relevant because you don't want to take that on. But if you're not sure, there's still an original wound, there's still an original imprint as to the reason that you're noticing it in the first place, whether it's your stuff you need to deal with or someone else's stuff that's resonating, that little part of you that it is yours. You can use it as a flashlight to start looking for it. Like, when have I felt like this before? Prometheus process, whatever tool you want to use.
That's a big key point. I think a lot of people can identify with that. Is when you get angry, it's a lot of times it's not your stuff, but it could be triggering that 1% that is your stuff. Because if you don't have a trigger for a point, it won't affect you. So we've been taught snakes are, dangerous animals and blah, but if you came from Mars somewhere, nobody taught you that a snake is nasty and it bites and could kill you, you're going to look at a snake and go, okay, well, whatever. So if you've never had an experience of anger towards something, or you've never gone through an emotional trauma, it won't trigger you. So something that may trigger me may not trigger Hank because he's never gone through that experience. So yes, sometimes you get around people, maybe even with the politics right now, that it's a deeper issue. Where have you felt the anger before? Because if you've never felt it before to that extreme, it probably won't have that hard of an effect.
Or if you're an empath, you might be picking up the cumulative point of view from all the people around you, and you're getting like the multiplier effect of crazy. And that's the other thing. Well, I return to sender with consciousness. This isn't mine. And whatever process you want to do, one of the techniques at Rishi's Metaphysical Institute, where I studied, is if you feel something coming in that's not yours and you have that awareness, like just pretend that you're grabbing it with your energetic fingers. Just grab it, take it out of your solar plexus, and offer it to the light, or offer it to the earth. Either way, whatever you resonate more with. But the idea is that you're doing something physical. You're actually taking an action, and you're giving. It's a physical representation of your intention that this isn't mine. I'm moving it on where it can be transmuted, whether you want to give it to the earth, to the water, to the upper world, the Hanak Pacha, whatever you like to do. You're doing an action to start to mitigate it.
Yeah, and I think what just came to mind is maybe you want to write it on your little parking lot sheet, but maybe we should create a course to really dive deep and help people develop these skills.
Absolutely. We can definitely do that.
That's the trick. It's like what we're talking about is all it brings you awareness to say, oh, okay, I need to think about this because I didn't realize this. But then it's a whole other path of really developing these skills. I remember I had this, I'm gonna share this little snippet, but I went to the, you know what the Omega Institute is, right? Have you been to the Omega Institute?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been there, but I know much about them because I was modeling a business after them for someone. But
Great.
yeah,
Serene
it's amazing.
place. It is. It's
Amazing.
so
And
serene over there.
completely green. They got like solar panels and
Yeah.
geothermal and wind turbines. It's a really an amazing place. It's like the Cadillac of learning. And
Yeah,
it's kind of
so many people there, and you're in nature and you're peaceful. It's just great. But I had gone there for an animal communication course, and I flew, and I had to fly into New York, and then catch. And there's no easy way to get there from flying into New York, so I had to take a connection, and from the connection, fly into Great Plains. And anyway, I get to a part of New York, and I get to the airport, and they're like, well, the second flight is canceled or backed up and all this stuff. And then I still have to take a taxi from there that's an hour drive to drop me off at Omega. Well, anyway, I can't get to my connection. They canceled that flight. And I am freaking out. Like, all right, what the hell am I going to do? You know, I was ready for this course. I'm like, I'm not going to get there in time for this course. I paid for this course. And so I decided I'm going to rent a car. This was in New Jersey, as a matter of fact. So I rented a car. I'm like, screw it. I'm going to have to rent a car and drive 3.5 hours. I don't know where the hell I'm going, you know? And so I was so worked up driving in the rain. And if you've ever been to Omega, it's these down roads in New York that are just like dark and no lights. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I get to Omega and I am freaked out. Like I am like telling this person, I am all nervous. And these people were so calm and so serene. I'm like, why do you not have any empathy for me about this? I've had a horrific day. It's 11 p.m. and I barely got here. It's pouring rain. And they are like, but now I'm looking back and now I understand. They held the space. It's like, it's okay. Here's your key to your room. I'm like, why are they not reacting? Why are they not like, you know, why are they not diving into my stuff? And now I look back and this is the perfect story, a scenario. When you learn to hold the space, you just don't get that reaction.
Right. And it's
Nature
good that
is
they
a good
didn't.
place. Yeah.
If you have someone that is having and this happens a lot of time if a client comes in for a healing and whatnot, and they do word vomit on you about everything that's been going on. If you start to give them like, oh, poor you and all this, you're actually cementing you're validating the victimization, you're validating what they perceive as an experience that happened to them instead of through them. And it takes them further away from being able to recognize it. Where in your case, they didn't feed into it. They provided
No.
space for you to choose something different and for you to have a different experience instead of going, oh, poor you.
Yeah.
That must have been terrible.
I wanted them to go, oh, poor you. I had a crappy day that day. I
know.
mean, that was horrific.
Well, because people like wallowing in their shit sometimes. And when they get that validation, that's where they're getting a sense of contribution from people. But that really, in the long game, isn't necessarily ideal. I mean, if that's where someone is, that's where you are, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But the question to ask, if you are in that space, is what could I be to have a different experience around this? What could I be to start experiencing getting contribution from other people in a way that wouldn't require me to be in a pile of shit to begin with?
And that's an energy thing. I have tools to clean that up and teach you how to clean that up. So when that moment happens, you gain more awareness, you pull yourself back, you cut to that, you get grounded, and you get into that space. But it is, I think, a little bit of a mental muscle to learn to start holding that space to the point that things don't affect you. And like Hank said, it doesn't mean you don't care. It's a space where you just are able to provide that love and compassion without diving in. And you're able to hear things clearer, and you're able to move through clearer. So this is a little bit of a mastery tool that I continue to work on because, you know, I love to help people, but sometimes I can't dive into your stuff.
Yeah. And if you start using these things, don't judge yourself if it doesn't happen right away. In AA, we have a saying that you practice spiritual progress, not perfection. And it's about you're continuing to refine yourself. In shamanism, we even say you're refining yourself to the point where you can offer your nectar to the world and it could be a service to your fellow human beings. So it's progress. You don't have to have it all perfect right away when you start using these tools. And I've shared this on previous streams. When I was deep in my drinking, there was one little affirmation. It was one of my first meetings. Someone said, self-pity and gratitude cannot coexist.
That's correct.
And they gave me this tool where they said, anytime you find yourself that you're in that pile of crap or whatnot, and you find yourself in a place of negativity or whatnot, even if you don't believe it, frame it in some sort of gratitude statement. So, like, oh, I wish I could help this person because they drink like me. Say, no, I'm so happy that I'm in a place of sobriety. If and when they're ready to be helped, I can be of service. And so I did that. And it took a year of doing that relentlessly, staying the course. And I really didn't buy into it. I'm like, this shit doesn't work.
I've
You
done
know,
that many times.
but there came a point where I kept doing it. I kept acting opposite, and it was like a teeter totter. There came a point where there was more weight on this side, and it started to become easy. And it came to the point where instead of just saying that kind of stuff, I actually went to a place of gratitude. I actually felt gratitude, and what a shift where you have that kind of stuff happen, and instead of getting dragged down into the trauma and the drama, you go, oh, that's amazing. I'm so grateful for the experience, and authentically mean it, and go to a completely different place. And it really is I think just like Omega, they probably have been in that place and they held the space and empowered you to have something different. So that's a really great story that spawned all kinds of good stuff here.
It did. Now I recognize what was going on at that time. I didn't quite have that was probably about three years ago now, and I didn't quite have that knowledge then. But now I look back and I'm like, I see what was going on there. They held the love and compassion, and they were there and they were calm and peaceful so that I could be calm and peaceful. Because when you dive into somebody else's things, then it just creates more of that energy. So you really have to breathe. One thing I do is put my tongue to the roof of the mouth when somebody's talking and vomiting, and just breathing in and out. And they don't know that you're doing it. There's some other tools that I use too, so that I'm like, I need to be in a quiet space so that I can really hear what they're saying and get to that root without all the extraneous information that is not really relevant here. So
I'm just catching up on a few comments. We had Doug coming in saying, good morning, all.
morning.
We have mystery Facebook user saying, good morning. If you're on a Facebook group, if you just put your name before the comment, then we know what to call you. Otherwise, we have to call you mysterious mysterious Facebook user. But Ernie was offering, well, I'll put a face first because it's more of a comment than something I can speak from. But Faith was saying these tools are invaluable as a social worker, dealing with everyone's stuff and holding space. Absolutely. This is invaluable to anybody who's dealing, whether it's a social worker or you're a clerk at a grocery store, you are in the thick of it, dealing with people's stuff, because I've seen many meltdowns at grocery stores over ridiculous things. But this one I wanted to speak a little bit to. Ernie puts down, raise your frequency helps to detach. And the analogy I want to give is, think of yourself like a hot air balloon, right? You come into this world and you have descended from infinite beingness into physicality, and you have all this weight holding into the space. And as you start to shed all these heavy things, all these things from other people, places, things, all these tethers that hold you down, your balloon starts to be able to go higher and higher. So that's why when you say raise the frequency, you're enlightening yourself by getting rid of all these things that are heavy, both from other people and from yourself. And the more you can do that, you basically reascend, you become enlightened, you can become in the world, but not of it. And that's the real key. What would it take for you to recognize yourself as a divine infinite being and access all that unrefined God consciousness, source energy, whatever the case is, through the filters of the body and the being, all the crap that we have been projected onto as we grew up and everything, and express that light out into the world to manifest divinity on the physical plane? That's really all these tools. That's the end game, is to be able to hold the space and be able to bring that through this and make amazing, miraculous things.
Absolutely.
And then, and if that doesn't work, have ice cream. Mark says, when life goes overwhelming, ice cream is very empathetic. But there is something to be said there for that comfort food and everything.
Yeah.
People are that is a place people go. That's a way to medicate yourself. And I did it with alcohol, and then other things. And that is
who else does it with wine and alcohol? Who out
Oh,
there?
I'm sure. Yeah.
I've done it. I'll admit it. It's the whole man, it's been a rough week. I need a glass of wine. I need a drink. What is that's a common line? I need a drink.
Oh, I never needed a drink because I was always drinking. So like I would take a glass of whiskey in the shower with me. That's how
Oh,
the
wow.
extent that I was. So when I say I'm a
Fascinating.
professional drinker, I mean it. Like I had a little walk-in shower. There's a little shelf in there. I'm like, well, that obviously was made for my whiskey glass, so I could drink while I'm taking a shower in the morning. Uh, but it doesn't start like that. You start medicating with something that seems very innocent and very, not too damaging or whatnot. And before you know it, you have, slipped down this slippery slope, whether it's alcohol or another drug or eating ice cream. You get to a point where there's so much weight from the addiction or what you're medicating with that now it's suffocating you, and it makes it really difficult to start choosing differently. But it all starts with one little thing. If you like, self pity and gratitude cannot coexist, that saved me from that one little thing, and choosing differently. And if you just start with one thing from today's broadcast or going through our other things, like that one thing can start opening up doors, windows, and opportunities for you to be
Yep.
willing to choose differently and to start to have a different experience. It's that willingness to be different and to start choosing differently and not continuing to fall into that well-trodden wagon wheel rut. That's what we say in NLP. It's like you have change and then you go right back in the same rut. You have to change and continue to choose differently in order to have that long-lasting shift in your reality.
And that's a brain muscle. That's a brain muscle development because, as we talked about one of other sessions, emotions can be very addicting. And I did a little video yesterday too. We hang on to these things um, because they're comfort. We know how to deal with them. When we embark on something that we don't know how to deal with and we don't know how to control, then it's uncertainty and it's scary. So a lot of people will hang on to certain emotions and these feelings because it's giving them something, and we get attached to that. So emotions can be addicting too. And then we get the ice cream on top of that because we really don't want the emotions, but we do. And
The ice cream is delicious, so it's really tough.
it
I'm
is.
right there with you, Mark. I'm an ice cream person. I'm vegan, but there's some amazing vegan ice creams. I'll tell you that. Oh, they're better than the real thing. But to your point, like the past, and we have this one thing. I'll put this up from a previous stream. Ego is edging God out, and the ego's job is to keep you safe. And ego will let you choose the same thing over and over again. It will let you it would rather you relive the worst day of your life because it knows you survived it than for you to be able to choose a different possibility. And a shout out to Ryan Dean, because that's another thing that I got from his empathic empowerment training class. Shameless shout out for his work. If you go to empathichealings.com, Ryan has a whole course curriculum around empaths, which is amazing. But I got that from him too, about the ego wanting to protect you, and always it will manipulate you. You might think you're choosing something different, but it's really the same choice with a different costume on. And that's where feeling is the language of the soul. And when you start asking, well, how do I feel about something? That's your tried and true answer. Then the brain will start to convince you not to do that, because it's like, no, you don't want that. That's going to create different possibility. Don't know what's going to happen if we do that. Choose this where we know what's going to happen and it's safe, but it might look like something new. So that's something to be very mindful of as you start to use these tools and whatnot.
Yeah, and so this is something you need to develop and learn. And maybe some of you are just starting on embarking on this mission and didn't have the awareness to all of this. There's a lot of emotional stuff going on right now, and I really think that COVID is pulling out those things that we need to work on that were shoved under the carpet for so
Yep.
long. And this is why it comes up in relationships, it comes up with kids, it comes up with your family relationships, even within yourself, things you didn't like. Why am I so much more angry now? Yes, it's the collective consciousness, but it's also pushing the buttons within yourself that need work, need healing, so you can get to the next level of being more peaceful. And it's not comfortable and it's not fun. It's not I snap my fingers and everybody wants to feel amazing instantaneously, don't they? Give me a pill, uh, give me a spray. And I get it. I get it. Sometimes it is really uncomfortable and it takes time and you don't want to be in that space and you squirm and you're like, get me out of here. But no, when you feel like you can't, that's when you must.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes we take 20 plus years to dig ourselves into the hole that we choose, and then we expect to get out in one day.
yeah.
And though that can happen, I've seen miraculous things. Sometimes you need to put a little bit of effort and stay the course and fill that hole in. And it doesn't mean it's going to take 20 years, especially if you use some of these tools. You can fast track a lot of that, but give yourself a break to know that it's not going to be like poof, like the genie, and it's like done. Ernie has a great little thing, kind of showing the skilled and unskilled applications. Seek your spiritual self is the skilled version of spirits, or drink the spirits low. I like that because a lot of things are skilled, even in astrology. There's skilled and unskilled applications of that energy. So, what could you do every day to use all your gifts in the most skillful way possible to create change and possibility for yourself and for the world? Because the more you work on yourself, you can't help but to start to change the people around you.
Exactly.
And it starts to have this ripple effect where I worked on me and now everything has changed. I have different friends, and even some friends that I had in my drinking days recently got sober. They messaged me out of the blue. They're like, "Hey, man, you were like my Yoda. What you said really sticks. I just got sober. I got 2 months." And I've had that happen a couple times where, as I was changing myself, I was still kind of in the same groups, and I started to have an impact on other people. That seed took a long time to germinate. It took 10 years for one person, but the seeds are there. How actively could you nurture those seeds to get them to sprout for you sooner than later would be the question.
Exactly. And this, we're giving you some tools or at least awareness. And I have had this happen in my life multiple times where as I started to up level, as I started to raise my frequency, things around me changed and people around me changed. Now, one of two things is going to happen. Either the person, people around you are going to, maybe change for the better, or they may drop off. So be aware of that you're like, well, how come so-and-so and I don't talk anymore? How come my relationship ended? Sometimes people are in a very low place. They can't, I want to use can't, they will have a very challenging time meeting you where you are once you get up to those levels. Or they
And
don't
it's
want to
not a
go there
rightness
anymore.
or a wrongness either. That's just a dissonance that the
Yeah.
two vibrations don't jive. And kind of an analogy. I know I don't think you have kids, so you might not relate to it. But when my wife and I had kids, we had all kinds of friends that fell to the wayside, and we had new friends that had kids. And then as our kids from high school also ended up having kids, all of a sudden the connection was there again. And it's not a rightness or wrongness. Our life circumstances changed. We had a whole different vibration in our life with children, and as other people had that vibration, all of a sudden there was a fit again. And we were just as good of friends then as we were before. Just energetically, the two don't mesh. And that's a really good analogy to show you it's not a rightness or a wrongness as to where people are. It's just the two vibrations either jive or don't jive. And not to judge
Yeah.
people if they do fall off, or judge yourself for being a bad person because you don't want them in your life. It's not about that. It's just a difference.
Right. And that's happened to me. There's some friends that have kind of dropped off to the wayside as I up leveled. So it's going to happen. Don't worry about that so much. It may be kind of sad too sometimes. Like I was really good friends with that person, but you're at a higher level now, and those people are on a different plane, and maybe you'll reconnect, maybe you won't. But the right things for you, your journey in this life is your journey to learn all the lessons you need to learn. We are all here for that purpose, to learn whatever the soul needs to learn here so we can move on. And we forget that. We're not just here to eat food and hang. We're here to enjoy life, yes, but we are in this human body, and the soul is using the body and moving the body and learning what it needs. It's a vehicle. And so we're here to do whatever our purpose is. And our goal is to get more people on their purpose and on their path, and getting them to the highest place that they can be, because that's the best.
And I got a comment from Mark, and I know Mark means this as a joke, but I'm totally spinning it, and I can use this. So before I put up Mark's comment, I want to, so many people before COVID-19, we take for granted like being able to go to the store and not wait in line, or go to the store and finding always what we need. So so Mark puts up, I am very happy and grateful when I find toilet paper at the store, how my life has changed in 2020. What if all of moments in life were toilet paper moments in COVID, right? Like where you go and like, oh yay, they have toilet paper, you get all excited. Like all the times before that when you got toilet paper, what if all those times you could have had that same level of gratitude? So I told you, Mark, I'm going to spin this, like use things like that, those little opportunities that we used to take for granted, and now in this situation, like, wow, we're so grateful when certain things work out. Or one example I like to use from my wife's point of view, she is grateful for everything here. She's from the former East Germany, and her brother or her, they would sometimes have to wait in line for like an hour to maybe get a banana or two. And that's how rare things were. So she has this unique appreciation that when you go to the store and you can get fruits that are out of season, or you can pick up plums or bananas or toilet paper, whatever it is, she doesn't take anything for granted because there was such scarcity when she was growing up as a kid that she really like holds everything as sacred. Like, what if we could all be like that? That we could look at every moment, everything that comes to us as a sacred thing and an opportunity to really have an expression of gratitude for it.
Absolutely. And so getting back to just we get tangled up in the emotional stuff right now. And
Trauma and drama.
trauma and drama. And some people are very addicted to trauma and drama. So I'm sure all of us know some of those people.
Yep. And if you don't think you're one of those people, you probably are one. Not kidding.
Yeah.
But look at all the reality TV shows that we have now, including politics. There's this, there's all like, people really do like this stew pot of shit that people create around them. I've said shit more times in this broadcast than I think I have cumulatively in all the other broadcasts before. Now it is an acronym though, so in case iTunes is listening and they're gonna like not let this one go out on iTunes, it means spiritual human in transition. So this entire time I have been using it as an acronym, an acronym of change and transformation for humanity.
Yeah. And a little medical point that just came through is these are all, our, it's interesting because our emotions and our physical bodies are kind of entangled. But people that have a low adrenal function sometimes need that TV, the coffee, the drama to just kind of turn on the adrenals so they pump more adrenaline because they don't have enough of that thing going to keep them energized, if that makes sense. Your adrenals are a huge area of absorption of dealing with emotional stuff. They can make when they're in a hypofunction, meaning they're insufficient and not pumping out enough cortisol, enough adrenaline, all these things. So when they're not functioning properly, you may feel more fatigued, you may experience depression, you may experience all these things. And sometimes we use our emotions to get that punch, to get them to put us in a fight or flight so that they pump that stuff into our system. So it's very fascinating when that happens. So sometimes people just need that TV or they need that argument to get the energy going because they don't have enough of it. It's a very fascinating thing that happens.
What they need is to buy the adrenal tuning fork for me, and then they could just ring the fork and they could activate their adrenals without having to get into the trauma and drama. And I don't have it on my website. I just looked and I don't have it. If anybody is interested in adrenal fork, PM me. I will get it added to the site. But literally, there is a fork for almost every organ and thing. So if you are out of balance, you could, with a very simple tuning fork processor, download Audacity and just play the frequency of a healthy adrenal gland, and that can help it come into sympathetic resonance. But there's other tools. Like if you do have a lack somewhere, there's a healthy way. There's a skilled and unskilled way to heal as well. So rather than medicate with TV, you could acclimate with vibration.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's so many different ways, guys. There's so many things out there that are helpful for these types of situations that you might not know. So hope a lot of people are just, when you're listening, know that there's way more that you don't have to go to your physician and just get a medication to drown out your depression when you might not even have depression and you might not really have anxiety. It might be an adrenal function thing. It might be, you're picking up on other people's stuff, but you don't know it because you never knew there was this empathic thing going on. And so those emotions are then pushed down. And the antidepressants, we had a whole series on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. If you're empathic and you have a gift, a lot of people that don't know this, they go and get these antidepressants. And if you're intuitive, these things will numb you to the point that your neurotransmitters are not going to be able to fire, and you're not going to be able to get that information as strongly so that you can use it to your advantage. So that's just a key point I want to take a note on.
And if you are overwhelmed with it, the other thing, like Dr. K and myself, we both see clients in person and virtually. We have the healing clinic that we'll talk about a little bit more at the end, but like twice a month, we see people out of out of the office and like little mini sessions. And it's a great opportunity just to have all those layers of stuff that aren't yours that can easily be removed. And it gives you, it's like taking a huge weight off, and then you have a much easier time navigating within your own energy field. And I have to bring up Mark's comment. You're going to be all kinds of great segues today, Mark. Mark says, if all else fails, hug a tree. In shamanism, we call them Mauki, the Mauki Kuna, the tree people. And you walk up to a tree, you want your navel to connect with the tree. And we look at these trees as these bridging entities. They reach into the upper world. They also go way deep into the lower world. And they have the ability to transmute anything because they take all the elements, earth, water, wind, and sun, and create something new. So trees are a great vessel for you to connect with and allow all the heaviness just to dump out of you into the tree, and it will redistribute and shift it into all kinds of different possibilities for other beings in the universe. So trees, if all else fails, do hug a tree. In fact, even if it's not failing, hug a tree. Be a contribution to that tree and the world by offering whatever your heaviness is to that tree. And don't care what other people think if they see you. Like if you see a tree, it's beautiful.
It works.
Yeah, don't underestimate trees.
Don't feel you're weird. Don't be like, I'm a damn weirdo. Just go hug a tree. Go somewhere where there's nobody and just go hug a tree.
And if you want the Quechua to invoke it, you can go up to the tree, Iari, which means victory and praises, Mauki Kuna, the trees, Ompwi, 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 heal what the soul's already healed. And you're asking them to also print upon you the version of you that has nothing to heal, that's already healed. And that imprint helps you shift your vibration into your state of wholeness where you don't need to heal anything because you've already done all the work. What if it was that easy just to imprint yourself with yourself healed and allow everything else to kind of start to shift and shimmy and become lighter, let that balloon start to float up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So cool. Mark's full of them today. We missed you, Mark. And I that is a huge compliment when I say that, because I teach never miss anyone. Because if you miss something and something external to you affects your state of being, that's an addiction. So I'm addicted to Mark. I'm calling myself out.
It's an attachment.
It's an attachment to Mark. Where I normally, like when I was going to Lilydale every month for like over 2 years, doing my studies at Fellowships of the Spirit, which I prefer over Omega, by the way. It's way closer of a drive, and they have great programming there too. And it's like right in New York. But my wife would ask me, are you going to miss me? And I go, absolutely not. But I do have a preference for your presence. But I do miss Mark. I'm so glad you're back, Mark.
That's great. I did a little tidbit on attachment too. I did a little video on my page yesterday about, it really downloaded to me yesterday. What are we so attached to that you can't let go of? Food, people, places, things, money, that if this was taken away, would it send you over the edge? Or your kids? Some people really attached to their kids. You have to look at these things because you are a divine being, you're a divine soul. You don't own anything. And if it starts to own you, if money starts to own you, if your kids start to own you, if food starts to own you, it has control over you, and you do not have control over it. You want to get to the state where you can live with or without it. And that's tricky. Right.
And that's where we shift from addictions to preferences. And Neil Donald Walsh gives a great example. I think it's in his book, Happier Than God, where you go into an ice cream shop and you have your heart set on chocolate and they're out of chocolate. And person A puts up a huge stink. Well, if I can't have chocolate ice cream, I'm not going to have any. And they storm out. That is an addiction. That outside stimulus impacted your state of being, where the person where it's just a preference go, no problem. Vanilla's great. I love vanilla too. And they just shift and have, roll with the punches in a way. And that's a really great illustration of an addiction versus a preference. And you want to have preferences always.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just a key point. So bring your awareness to that. Where are you so hung on to something? And it can be really, really subtle thing. When we talk about addiction, it's not, people think of addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs. Those are the two top things that pop up to people, but it's not. It's addiction to emotions. It's addiction to somebody giving you attention. It is addiction to, I see it on so many levels, that it's not addiction to your kids, addiction to your spouse, codependency, addiction to hanging on to, money's a big one, just safety around money.
Or addiction to lack. Yeah. Really, like people love to be in the space where they have lack and they can be a victim to everything because they don't have the financial resources or the abundance or whatever it is to choose differently. Oh, I can't do that. I don't have the money. Like that is a crutch. That is, and you're empowering the lack then, because in a way you would rather that be, because if I had all the money that I could ever wish for, now I actually am responsible for what shows up, and I'm responsible for my choices, and I'm not a victim anymore because I have no reason, I have no crutch not to be. So that is a huge one too, be addicting to the lack.
Yeah, and addiction to their disease too. If people hang on to their
Oh yeah.
disease, like I haven't seen, it's just addiction to certain thoughts. Because if we take away the disease, then you're responsible. Then you are going to have to step up, and you may
Yeah.
have to do things, and you may have to mow the lawn, and you may have to do all these things you don't want to do, or you don't want to deal with, or people you don't want to confront, or you won't get the attention anymore from your husband or your wife or your sister or your kids or whatever it is. These things ride on so many different levels. So be aware. Just take some time and think about it. Where am I stuck? Where do I have an addiction? And then let us help you kind of untangle that, because we all got them somewhere. Little things. Very few are aware. What am I saying of enlightened souls to the point that nothing affects them. There's very few souls on this planet that nothing affects them. So
And when I say this next thing, really think of this from the place of oneness, from the acknowledgement that source is all there is all at once. It's not until you accept responsibility and accountability for everything that you can begin to change anything.
exactly.
It's not until, really think about that,
Yeah.
and think of it in that macro sense, that even the person on the street, the politician, horrible atrocities, quote unquote, in other parts of the world, if you can really say, on some level, I've created that, and acknowledge that, now you have the ability and power to start to choose something different that will shift that in your reality. Even if it's something way outside your immediate reality, you are everything. You're the only one in the room in the grandest sense. So I wanted to throw that out there too. And Mark has an actual question. It's so unlike Mark. How would you deal with a mean coworker? Would you put them in their place or kill them with kindness? Any idea, thoughts on, well, not just coworkers, and that could be somebody in the grocery store, somebody that's really being abrasive or whatnot. Do you stand up for somebody? Like you see people like say, hey, you need to stop doing this, or do you act opposite and kill them with kindness? I think it's kind of situational in a sense, depending on exactly what's going on and what feels lightest. The question would be, what feels as though it's going to create the most possibility. But even if you decide to put them in their place, what space are you holding while you do it? Because it's about the space. You could
Yeah,
pretend to
it's
be
about the
kind
space.
and not really mean it, and you can
Yep.
put them in their place and that not really be in the space where it's going to make a change. It's the space you're holding, and then while you're holding that space, the question then becomes, what could I be here, and then what could I do to create the greatest shift possibility and change and by circumstance. And then you're just gonna, it takes practice, that muscle that Dr. K keeps talking about. You practice over time, and then when you are in those situations, you'll just have a knowing of how best to deal with things. And you still might screw up and make a mistake and think, well, I really would have done that different. But that's where a key thing comes in, is don't judge your past choices based on current data. Because if we did, that we really get tripped up on that. You look in hindsight and go, oh gosh, why did I do that? Oh, that's totally not me. And if you were presented with that same circumstance again, you would have chose differently. But typically speaking, in the moment, you made 100% the right choice for you in that time. Even if you knew it was a bad choice, you chose 100% correct. So always, find solace in that and know that, yes, I would choose differently, but don't beat yourself up if things don't turn out the way that you would have liked, well,
Right.
once you make a choice.
The thing that just came up to me, why do you call them a mean coworker? What are they pushing? What
Ooh,
button are they pushing in
good
you
catch.
that's triggering you? Because if somebody's being a crappy person and you don't have a button to push on that feeling, like say somebody's calling you you're ugly. Well, if you don't feel ugly inside, it won't affect you. So what is this person doing? Work on that, cleaning that up, and then you're just going to hold that space and let that person be who they are, and you're going to be able to look at them and say how interesting that this person chooses to push that button. Because here's the other thing, Mark, somewhere you're attracting this person, so it's giving you the opportunity to heal something inside you. That happens too. We attract these there we have a bunch of mirrors running around in our life. When we're trying to heal something within us, we attract those people to help us push those buttons to go, wait a minute, let's look at this. Yeah, there's crappy people, there's annoying people, but when you can get to that space where you're not affected by that person's meanness. You just look at them like a TV screen and go, that's interesting. Interesting that person's choosing to act that way.
Right. And so you, when you mentioned too that about the mean thing, I totally missed that. Looking through the lenses of meanness, a lot of times it's us imposing that they're mean on them, and they're not mean at all. And we've given the example on a stream before where you ask your boss for the day off, and they say no, and you put on the glasses of meanness, and you look at your boss. Oh, my boss is mean. Where in reality, five other people already requested that day, and they just couldn't do it. It was just a choice that we then add a weight to that had nothing to do with the space they were being, and we project that space on them. Or they're taking other coworkers out for lunch. Oh, my boss is unfair, but he's really taking them out because they're behind in a project, and they got to get caught up, and he's got to kind of have a come to Jesus talk with them or whatnot over a project. We say unfair, but in reality, it was just a choice, and we have that tendency to add weight to things through these filters that really it was just data. It was just data. It was just an experience that now we have weighted to go one way or the other, and that is a common pitfall, myself included, where because it happens where you don't recognize that it's happening, and then it's always about in AA we say that you do a daily inventory. You look at things all the time retrospectively, and you look to catch those things, so that you become aware of them and start to choose different in the midst of those reactionary times.
That's a really key point, and I do that all the time now. And this kind of ties into the whole empath emotional thing. When we get triggered like that, which has happened to me many times, but I know now to use my intellect to go, okay, wait a minute, let's back off. Let's look at this whole situation. Maybe this person perceived things a certain way, and it triggered something within me, and I wanted things to be a certain way. And later I always do find out there was oh, this is what happened. This is why this happened. Then I'm like, oh man, I feel like an idiot. So you make a judgment about something when, like Hank said, that person really in the background, you don't have all the information, and you're not willing to look at all the information. You just took it in, you got fired up about it when that had nothing to do with any of that at all, or maybe just a little bit.
And sometimes when those things happen, we stop receiving any data after that point.
Yep.
And Param has a great example. If you ever have a chance, I highly recommend it. There's a guy at Baldwin Wallace. His name is Param. I can't pronounce his last name. He does a course called Why Life Sucks, The Global Voyage to Overcome the Misery of Everyday Living. Wordy title, but he starts by having everybody slam their hand on the desk, point their finger at them, and say, Param, you don't know your ass from a hole in the ground. And he has him do that like 3 times. And then he says, as we go through this, I'm going to say things that you don't agree with. But now you can get over that very quickly because you already know that I don't know my ass from the hole in the ground. So you don't have to give any weight to that judgment. And you can receive the next thing I'm about to say that may have something for you. I mean, it's just
It's great.
He's like an Indian Robin Williams. He's hilarious, and through the whole course, it's like learning deep metaphysical truths, and you don't even realize what hits you at the end. It's so good, and we're going to have him on a stream eventually. We just haven't connected. He's agreed to come on and do a stream or two. So eventually, I'll have Param on one of the broadcasts somewhere. So be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, if you just go on Facebook and look, he has an entire 3.5 hour. One of his talks that's available for free on Facebook. All his talks are free. But you do yourself a kindness and go seek one out and give yourself a treat because it is fantastic stuff.
India is full of enlightenment. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they have a totally different perspective on life than we do. If you ever go to India, I have not been. It's on my bucket list, but it's dirty there. It is filthy there, from my understanding. And they don't see it that way, though. They honor the cows. They have a totally different perspective on life, and they look at us like, you guys are.
And all of his work is from a mystic called Osho, which there's hundreds of books on. And he and I agreed. He read a book about Neil Donald Walsh, and I read one of Osho's books. We traded gurus for a little bit because Neil Donald Walsh is one of my big influences with a lot of the ways I frame things. But when we get together and we talk about these things, we find that we're talking about the same thing with very different vocabulary. And that's the thing to keep in mind. We say empaths, and we're using all these different terminologies. If one of the words that we use doesn't resonate, well, what word do you have that does? And maybe don't get caught up in the language of things, because a lot of times we're talking about the same things energetically and we're just labeling things different. And rather than get shut down because we don't agree with the word chosen, we can turn that into a new possibility by recognizing, oh, they're saying this that resonates with how I frame things over here, and now you can receive it in a whole different way. So that's a good little segue to talk about language. my favorite little saying, language is the feeble attempt to put words of the allness to the isness. It's a quote from Neil Donald Walsh, that when we're talking language, it's so limiting that we could easily get lost on these little things, and not to get caught up on that. Like, really, what's the energy underneath the words? What space are Dr. K and I holding while we're talking about the things we're talking about? Let that get in. Because sometimes we might use a word that isn't, well, the most ideal for something. It happens. I think at the beginning of the broadcast, I'm like, now that I said that out loud, I don't like I said it. So like, don't get caught up in the words. Like, what's the energy behind the words? That's going to have a greater impact, and you'll receive a lot more
Exactly.
if you're receiving the totality of what we're creating here, and not just what we're talking about, because
And
it's
sometimes
way
there's not words to describe what we're talking about really
right.
well. I've learned that. I've had a challenge sometimes because I read things. I'm able to see into people, and I have a challenge sometimes putting into words to tell somebody what's going on with you and what needs fixed. I see the energy, I feel the energy of it, but it's very challenging sometimes to relay that. So we do our best, and when you're present, you can feel that, and that's the empathic thing.
Absolutely. We're coming up. We have about 5 minutes left. So, last chance for any comments or questions. Ernie did offer that kindness is from the heart. Absolutely. In my tradition of shamanism, it's all heart based. They call this the center of Munai, which is a combination of your will and love expressed into the world. So, the heart space is definitely let your consciousness go from your head into your heart, and just see how much will that change in your life.
Because you have your heart chakra and you have your crown chakra, and these things are always interplaying, and sometimes this gets a little too big, and we don't have expansion in our heart chakra enough to, it's not big enough sometimes to encompass what we need to encompass.
And
You're
what
in your
we're
head too much.
Yeah, the head is ego, edging God out. We put that acronym up before. So yeah, get into the heart space. And interestingly enough, if you look at tuning forks, the chakra set, heart is 136.1, which is Om. And the soul purpose and the earth purpose, which is the an octave above and below. So as you go to the chakras above the crown and below the root, the next one's either way is also a heart chakra frequency, but it's a different octave. And so we're allowing ourselves to double in vibration, and step into these other higher, not higher, but different states of awareness and being in the world. Mark, I'm not going to put that one up yet. Health foods that are empathic. So like, maybe that's going to be safe for part two, because if we start going down this road, then that could be a longer conversation, and then we're going to have to edit the video for Instagram, and I don't want to do that, Mark. So I'm not going to put your comment up.
And we did thing on foods a while back, so
Yeah, you can go back and watch the replay. Which, speaking of, if you go to the website here, emergenceofbeing.com, under contributors, there is a page for Dr. K. There's a page for me that links to our websites, tells you all the different things that we do. Also on the website, it talks about our energy clinic. So on the first and third Mondays of every month, there's a little overview. We do an energy clinic at Emergence of Being. We have that little room in the background that we'll take you into, and it's a 15-minute session where Dr. K and I work in tandem with whatever our intuition goes. Every single session is different. It's really amazing. Like a little 15-minute session, you'd think we would have this cookie cutter and it would be the same for everyone, but it's quite different. Quite different. Sometimes I'm chanting, and Dr. K is flinging energy places. It really is a great thing. So if you want to check that out, but then also under live streams, there are links to all the different live streams that Dr. K does, that I do, that the other contributors like Sean and Casey do. So it is a powerhouse of potential change if you want to go back and go through all of those, all of that content. Any final thought, Dr. K? This is so much fun. I love where oops, I didn't mean to do that.
cutting us off already.
No, well, I didn't hit the end broadcast button. That would have cut us off. But Mark has a final thought. Thank you both for the great info. You're both super awesome. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you, Mark. We hope everybody enjoys your weekend.
Yeah, I hope
and
it's
and go through the weekend and every day with as much awareness as possible, because in the place of awareness and consciousness, you just create way different choices. You make different choices, which create way different possibilities than if you go through an autopilot.
Yeah,
React.
you can't get to switching things and changing things until you bring the awareness, because what are you going to work on if you're not aware? So I think where I'd want to end off is just, Hank and I harp on this, sometimes the same things over and over, but it's really important to hear, and sometimes you need to hear it 50 times until it ding, it finally goes in your head, and you gain the awareness. Bring awareness first, then let's work from there.
Yeah, awareness is like GI Joe. Knowing is half the battle. Knowing is more than half the battle. Knowing is like 90% the battle, and then to 10% once you know is what you're going to be based on what you know. And my final thing is look to be in creationship with everything, not relationship, because relationship is where you recognize things as separate. If you can come from the place of oneness, being in the world but not of it, it becomes a creationship where you're in creation with everything instead of relating to everything, and everything shifts then. But thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to see you next week, Friday. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.